Welcome. I hope you are having a wonderful night, dear viewer. Tonight, I will be telling some terrifyingly scary stories. Make sure to leave your feedback on the comments so I can make this the best experience for you. And if you have any stories you would like me to tell, you can send them through the link in the description. Let's begin. Story 1. I went into the mountains yesterday morning and set up my tent in a campsite near a pretty popular mountain range near me. I had zero Christmas plans, so I thought I would go camping instead of sit at home. I also thought it would be an awesome time because I imagined there would be very little people at the site with me. I was correct, but surprised that I was actually the only person. Everything was totally fine, and I was enjoying myself. Decided to call it a night early since I did a pretty large hike earlier, and it wore me out. At about 8 p.m., I started to clean up everything and got in my tent to wind down for the night. I passed out very quickly. At about 3:15 a.m., I woke up to the zipper of my tent very slowly unzipping. I'm a super light sleeper on these trips because I stay on guard because I go alone. I also place my head by the entrance of tent for this very reason. I woke up and immediately understood someone was coming into my tent. I have a handgun I bring with me for protection, but have never fired it outside of the shooting range. Never once have I been put in a situation where I needed to, so my adrenaline immediately shot up. I slowly grabbed my handgun and faced it towards the entrance and decided to announce myself. I yelled, "I have a gun and I will shoot you in 5 seconds if I don't hear you run off right now, and leave me alone." It was silent for about 3 seconds until I heard someone start running off. I kept my handgun facing the entrance for another 10 minutes, just waiting for any sort of movement at all. I heard nothing, so I decided to grab my phone and call the police. They were around 20 minutes out, so I sat there still in defensive mode waiting. When the cops arrived, I came out of the tent and announced I was the caller. Gave them my story, and they decided to look around the area a little. Not even 15 feet away, they found some dude trying to hide in a tree. It's winter, and the trees are all bare. Come to find out, it was some dude who took mushrooms at another campsite nearby on one of the sides of the mountain, and was lost after walking around, and thought that my tent was his. He was younger, maybe early 20s, and I could tell he was pretty shaken up. They arrested him, and as they were throwing him in back of the car, he yelled to me, "Man, I'm sorry about that." That was my bad. They asked if I wanted to press any sort of charges, and I told the cops not to worry about it. I was pretty pissed about it, and even if this dude was lying about thinking it was his, I knew that he was harmless and was just a dumb dude who was high. Regardless of if they arrested him, I packed up all my stuff and left the campsite. There was no way I could have just fallen asleep like nothing happened right after. Story 2. I got home from work one day and took off my jacket, exhausted. I slumped into the living room and crashed hard on the couch. After a few minutes of relaxing, I let myself shut my eyes and drift off. But I was suddenly awoken when I heard the sound of a door opening. I rubbed the sleep from my eyes and began to hear a cheery voice. "Hello, baby." I'm home. I could recognize that voice anywhere. It sounded so uplifting and friendly to the ear. It belonged to the beautiful woman that I married only a few months before. I was still lounging on the couch with my eyes shut, but I could still imagine her coming in through the door in her dirty work uniform. She would feel so exhausted, but look so beautiful. The sound of her voice made me almost fully wake up. I began to sit up and wipe the sleep from my eyes. I thought it was a little strange for a moment because, well, I don't think I've heard her call me baby like that in the 3 years we've known each other. Was everything all right? "Honey, is that you?" I asked. "Yeah," she responded. "I just walked in." I put my feet on the floor and was ready to stand up and go see my beautiful wife, but I heard her voice again before I could get up. "I'm going to take a shower. I feel kinda gross and I want to clean myself real quick." As she began to finish her sentence, the sound of her voice got further and further away. I assumed that she was walking up the stairs. I realized that I wouldn't be able to see her before she got in the shower, so I laid back down onto the couch and almost immediately felt relaxed again. As I laid, a thought kept coming to me. I kept thinking about how much more comfortable I would be on the bed in our bedroom upstairs, and I knew I was right. It would. As much as I didn't want to get up off the couch, I knew that it would be much nicer laying under the covers with proper pillows under my head. I heard the water turn on upstairs. My wife had just gotten in the shower. Then another thought came to me. I would be able to see her when she got out of the shower. She would feel clean and pretty once again, and she'd be fully ready to sit and talk with me about her day. It only took another few seconds before I was fully convinced. I began to sluggishly rise off the couch and make the long trek over to the stairs in the front hallway. I started to slowly ascend them, but I froze when I heard the front door open behind me. I nervously wheeled around and saw my beautiful wife standing in the doorway. She was dressed in her usual work uniform as she aggressively shook the dirt off her shoes. She finally looked up and spotted me on the stairs. "Hello, dearest," she greeted. I did not respond. I stared at my wife, agape. She took off her purse and withdrew her phone. She looked slightly exhausted as she began to tap randomly around the screen. But she quickly looked back at me once she realized I was standing frozen. Her face became concerned. "Is everything all right?" she asked after a moment of silence. Just then, the water shut off upstairs. It only took a moment for me to realize that whatever had come into my house a few minutes before, whatever thing was standing in my bathroom at that moment, whatever it was not my wife. Whatever was in the shower had turned it off upon hearing my real wife come through the door. I quickly turned back around and bolted up the stairs, focusing my attention on the closed bathroom door ahead of me. I threw it open and looked over at the shower. It was wet, and the curtain had obviously been flung open, but no one was inside. "Is everything all right?" my wife worriedly shouted from downstairs. I didn't respond. I looked around the bathroom for any trace of the creature that was in there. I spotted a trail of wet footprints next to the shower. I followed them over to the bathroom window. It was wide open, which allowed for a large gust of wind to waft through the house. I peered out the window and saw deep claw marks in the grass outside. They were inhumanly large, and they led into the forest behind the house. Story 3. I used to look up to my older brother. Matt was smart, handsome, athletic, and the kindest person you'll ever meet. Everyone wanted to be him, and all the girls wanted to be with him. Matt truly had it all. That was until he met her, his girlfriend Samantha. They started dating in their senior year of high school, the two most popular kids at school who were meant to be. He was in love with her, and he spent every waking moment attending to her, every need. His love soon turned into a sick obsession. Matt and Samantha set out for a university a few cities away. My family and I hadn't heard from him in months, but we assumed he was simply preoccupied with college. It was nearing the end of spring when the whole world flipped upside down. I'll never forget coming home from school and seeing my parents seated at the kitchen table. My mother was crying her eyes out, while my father sat there blankly staring at my mother's phone. "Mom, what's going on?" I asked reluctantly. My mother tried to compose herself, but ended up crying even harder. My father cleared his throat, and with a wavering voice, he said, "Your brother." He paused for a moment to think over his next few words. "Something happened to your brother." My heart sank when the words left his mouth. I thought that Matt had died, but after hearing what happened, I wished that he did. Samantha's friends had noticed that she hadn't been to her classes and had gone to check on her. She shared a small apartment with Matt near campus, and when they arrived, they could hear sobbing from inside. There was no response after knocking several times and calling out Matt and Samantha's names. Their concerns grew by the second, so after a few more failed attempts, they eventually called the police. When the cops arrived, they were able to force the door open, and inside the once happy lovers' home was a scene from a horror movie. Pictures of the couple were strewn across the floor, furniture was toppled, and crying could be heard from the bedroom. The officers on the scene found my brother covered in blood, hunched over Samantha's corpse, and her abdomen had countless stab wounds. He was quickly arrested, and the police conducted a very thorough investigation of what happened. Inside Samantha's phone and laptop were a collection of evidence of Matt's abuse towards her. There were pictures of bruises and cuts on her body, along with detailed descriptions, along with timestamps of what he did to her. She talked about how he would get jealous of her talking to other men, and how angry he would get when she would try to have a moment away from him. She went on to say that he had repeatedly threatened to kill her if she even considered leaving him. The worst part was a video. A hidden camera in their bedroom captured a horrifying assault scene. Throughout the interrogation, Matt was almost catatonic, refusing to answer any of the police questions. My parents pleaded with him to explain his actions, but he remained deafeningly silent. The love for my brother turned into scorn. One by one, the people around him expressed their hate for him, calling him a murderer and wishing for him to be put down. My family tried to support him despite what the public thought of us, but it was a heavy weight that was slowly crushing us. My parents became the people that gave birth to a monster, and I was the little brother to a demon. I used to look up to my brother, but I wished every single day that he would just disappear. The investigation eventually came to an end. They gathered all of the evidence, and they were ready for the trial. My parents went to great lengths to find the best lawyer for my brother's case. After a tense week, it was determined that Matt, well, he was innocent. They ruled out suicide, but how could someone do that to themselves? Despite all of the evidence, my brother was able to flee freely. I couldn't believe it. I had prayed so desperately for Matt to be arrested, to be held accountable for his actions. As I watched Samantha's parents cry in front of me, tears welled up in my eyes. Matt just stood there, staring as Samantha's father cursed him to go to hell. After that, we simply went home, and Matt had since locked himself in his room. He stopped attending school and refused to leave the house. A few years had passed since then, and I was preparing to start college while Matt continued his exile in his bedroom. After all this time, I would barely see him, even though we lived under the same roof and his room was across the hall from mine. My parents still felt the need to take care of him, so they would always leave food outside this door. Every now and then, they would ask me to go check in on him, but there would be no response. There was just silence beyond that door. I thought that he died, but late at night, I would hear him leave his room to use the restroom and clean up a bit. I felt disappointment each time I heard his footsteps go through the house. One night, I caught a glimpse of him. I only saw his silhouette in the dark hallway. He seemed to have gotten a lot skinnier since the last time I saw him. I recall hearing a low whisper coming from him. I was surprised because it had been so long since I had heard him speak that I had forgotten how he sounded. I should have said something to him at the time, but he ran back into his room. The creaking of the wooden door, followed by the click of the lock, seemed to reverberate throughout the house. Even if it was only for a fraction of a second, seeing my brother reminded me of Samantha and made me sick to my stomach. A couple of days after that encounter, my parents sat me down on the couch to tell me they were going to leave for a few days. Of course, that wasn't an issue until they asked me to make sure that Matt was being taken care of. Just make sure he eats, and just check in on him, my mother pleaded. I agreed, but I was nervous thinking about being home alone with that man. It was a Friday when my parents left. They were going to be gone until Monday. It was just a few days of being home alone with Matt. That night, I ordered some pizza and quickly devoured a couple of slices before setting a few on a plate to bring to Matt. On my way, I noticed that his bedroom door was cracked open. I slowly took a few steps closer. It was pitch black inside of this room. I strained my eyes to try and peek through the darkness when a pale, gaunt face emerged. I jumped, and the paper plate I had in my hand fell to the floor. I looked down to see the mess I had made, and looked back to see that Matt's door was closed. Fuck, man. I cursed under my breath as I set the food back onto the paper plate. I left and came back with a new plate of food and placed it on the side of his door. I knocked on Matt's door and called out, "Hey, I brought you some food. Just Eat when you want, I guess. I expected to hear silence, but I could hear whispering coming from inside of his room. I decided to leave him alone and went straight to my room. I spent the rest of the night lying in bed, listening to music until I fell asleep. That night, I dreamt of Matt's white mask, like face staring at me from the end of my bed. The next day went by like normal. I got some errands done, talked with some friends, and played some video games. It wasn't until that night that I noticed that the plate of food I had set aside for Matt last night was left untouched outside his door. I called out to him, "Matt, you should eat." I stood there for a moment, but there was no response. Then I knocked on his door, and when my fist made contact with the wooden panel, it slowly pushed it open. I could hear crying from somewhere inside his bedroom's darkness. As I called out, "Matt," I felt a wave of dread wash over me. I pressed my hand against the cold wall until I found the light switch. Before I could turn on the light, I felt a hand grab my wrist. Matt's face was barely illuminated by the light from behind me, as he stared at me with a terrified expression on his face. I was close enough to see the outline of his cheekbones beneath his pale skin. His hair was a tangled mess that flowed down the side of his head, and his eyes were bloodshot. His face twisted from fear to pain as he let out an agonized wail. "I'm sorry," he screamed, and I looked in horror as a set of pale hands grabbed his shoulders to pull him backwards into the dark. My heart sank into my stomach, and I quickly retreated to slam the door shut. I couldn't comprehend what I had just seen. I thought to myself that it was probably my eyes playing tricks on me. I snapped out of my thoughts when I heard Matt whispering inside his room, "I'm sorry. I won't do it again. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry." As much as I hated my brother, something inside of me was telling me to help him. Matt continued to whisper, and each apology was grating in my ears. Something felt horribly wrong. I took a deep breath and opened the door. I remembered where the light switch was, and I reached out and flipped it. The light turned on and immediately started to flicker. Within the strobing light, I could see Matt curled into a ball on the floor with something hovering over him. It was a woman, or rather, something shaped like a woman. It was so skinny that I could make out each bone underneath its light gray skin. It was completely nude, and I saw that its stomach was ripped open to reveal its exposed insides. The woman looked up and stared at me with large white eyes. It had a smile that showed its sharp teeth. It opened its mouth and a large forked tongue writhed out of its maw. "Mine." A high-pitched, distorted voice croaked out of its throat. Its small hands grabbed Matt and lifted him to his feet. I began to shake in fear as it took its tongue and licked up and down his neck. "Mine," it wailed again. "Get out of here," Matt screamed, breaking me out of my stupor. I looked at him and I was reminded of the brother that I once loved. Somewhere deep inside, I still loved. The lights continued to flicker around us, and I could hear something thud onto the floor. The woman's intestines were slithering on the ground, slowly wrapping itself around Matt's leg and crawling up his body. She took her arms and pulled him into an embrace. She didn't care about me. All she wanted was my brother. I didn't know what to do. I rushed forward without a thought in my mind as I clutched her rotten intestine and pulled at it to set Matt free. His body began to lift up, and in an instant came slamming onto the floor. The intestine retracted back into the woman's body as she quickly stepped to me. I tried to take a step back, but her hand grabbed a fistful of hair on the back of my head. She pulled my face to hers, and I finally realized that this thing, this monster, was Samantha. She opened her mouth, and I was hit with a decaying stench as she shouted, I eat. She opened her mouth wider and wider. Her sharp teeth seemed to go on endlessly as she opened her mouth around my head. Slowly, she began to bite down, the ends of her fangs slowly piercing my skin. My skull felt the pressure of her teeth effortlessly sinking into it. "Stop it. Just take me," Matt whispered at our feet. My gaze went down to see him grabbing her ankle. "Just end it, please," he said. She removed her mouth from my head and bent down to look at Matt. She let out a terrible squeal of delight as she began to sink her hands into his chest. Blood began to spray out of his open torso, and he screamed. Screams were so horrible as she stood up and started at the throbbing organ in her hands, her eyes upturned into glee. She took a free hand and stabbed it into her chest. The sound of her ribs snapping filled my ears. I watched as it took Matt's heart and forcefully thrust it into the open hole in her chest. Samantha began to let out a discordant moan as the hole in her chest closed. Her abdomen began to seal with new flesh, and her gray skin began to regain color. Her body twisted and morphed back into the visage of the Samantha I had seen when she was alive. She looked at me and back down at Matt. She smiled. Even though the face was different, I recognized the monster I saw before. All mine. She said in a cutesy voice, and as I blinked, she was gone. Samantha was gone, and the mess of blood that filled the room had disappeared. The lights stopped flickering, and it was only me and Matt's corpse in the room. I fell to my knees beside my dead brother, and I just cried. That was when I noticed a stack of papers underneath my brother's bed, and I pulled them out. The papers were details of what had actually happened between Matt and Samantha. The whole story was twisted, and it revealed that Matt wasn't the obsessive one. It was Samantha. She was the one that threatened him if he would leave, and he was the one that felt powerless to her demands. Samantha took everything from my brother, and even after she died, she continued to take from him. I regret everything, just like everyone else around him. I jumped to conclusions. I wish I would have taken the time to reach out to him. But now he's gone. I'm left with an empty inside of me that's created from the things I'll never get to say to him again. My brother took the blame for everything, and he did it out of love.